Center for the Study of World Religions, Harvard Divinity School.
Before we begin our afternoon portion and welcome our second keynote speaker, I want to announce that between two Zoom links, we have apparently over 1,200 people joining us online. So welcome. Hello from wherever you are, and we're delighted that you can join us, and we hope that the experience is smooth. Now, I suspect that those numbers owe something to the fact that these three people are on the stage now. And it is my great privilege and honor to welcome to this podium our second keynote speaker, Alexandre de Salzmann.
Yes, I'm not an academic or a historian, I'm just someone engaged on that way, and I can share what I feel. Don't pretend to know more or to know better what Mr. Gurdjieff wanted to be said about him, really. It's not so easy, actually. But one can say that this teaching now is maybe suffer from a reputation of secrecy or exclusivity, which was maybe because of the care of those who preceded us. Not to not being afraid of distortion, but of the very nature of this research, so intimate. Now it needs to be spread out maybe more. I don't know, it's something, it's a real question. So I only will pull a few threads about who he was. The first thing is really, he asks himself, even with a greater intensity, what he proposes to his pupil. It's incredible. He puts obstacles in his projects. I don't do that. We all assume that life will provide enough trouble in whatever we do or intend to do, but no. He adds something intentionally, so that's something quite special. He asks himself all the time something, even counting, very complicated counts until late in his life. Not necessarily numerous, but what one could say it's just for beginners to occupy the mind that has tendency to wander. No. He does it himself at some point. Mr. Bonbon, Monsieur Bonbon, giving candies to children to see how they react and how their parents react. He asks himself while doing it some specific way to remember himself, varying the form, but while he's doing it, so that there's another level of what is going on when we see him just doing this gesture. One could say it shows his own way of the blame, the malamatis in this Sufi to be disconsidered to the point of losing faith as something that he chose to do for himself. Not to be worshipped, put on a pedestal. No, he refused that. Even to be called a master. He is a master, but Mr. Bennett says someone was trying to give a toast in his honor, and he responded with a very angry way. Of course, showing also what it is to play a role externally and be free internally. This is a great proposition in no matter what we do. Working in cafes, in the middle of the tumult, with his pity for the human condition. But he would work there, where I would want to isolate and be concentrated in the calm, right? Choosing Beelzebub as the hero of his allegorical tale, it was sure going to be suspect or dubious for many people, where it's completely different when you read it. So, he behaves in a way that it's the form of incarnation. It's not about ideas of or elevations, and someone mentioned that it's staying on that level. He's human. He's not leading to ethereal evocations. The fact that he stayed in Paris during the occupation, during Second World War, we don't know really what he intended to do on a different scale, maybe. Because he was, of course, helping his pupil, the poor of the neighborhood, Russian refugees, nourishing them, feeding them, and doing all the way using the black market, so for that even. So showing the need to do the thing to the end, the whole 9 yards, as you say here, right? Not just a little bit and then washing the dishes after the meals. He was so devoted to making someone understand the lesson, feel something. Such energy devoted to that. It's amazing considering all the attention he puts into that to help just one person in one specific condition. Lisette Yvon said he was she was helping him at the end of his life. She said she was an extraordinarily silent man, and being at his side was making you silent. So it says that in his present, energy changed. What is energy? quality of being, maybe. And the work starts at this level of energy. That's what Madame de Salzmann understood, and the way she developed the work, showing that for him, knowledge without the feeling doesn't have much sense. In the body, of course. So we heard that yesterday in the film that his grandmother, dying grandmother, gave him an injunction about doing differently, not like anyone else. And he says this is a founding injunction for his whole life. We found this in Beelzebub also when the transmission in the chapter of art, it's referred very often, this doing differently. Verifying also what he says for oneself. That's quite unusual. Why do we don't know his date of birth, really? He doesn't want to be reduced to the knowledge of a date. It shows us that we have to, not because we know a chronology, then we think we know. No. It was really helping people very much. Helping. Whereas he says in the aphorism, here we cannot help. We can only create conditions. Well, it shows we can't literally take what he says and make a dogma of it. Nothing is... No stable ground, just an opening all the time. So when he realized this, his institute was not meeting his expectation, he decided to change also, to write. Of course, because before it was purely oral transmission. And that changed in 1924, it started to write, so yes. And doing so, he shows his human part, his vulnerability. Acknowledging his failure, there's a sincerity that is very touching, because there's a chapter in Meeting with a Remarkable Man that was called the Material Question, that he initially intended to title The Rising, the Existence, and the Death with Long Agony of the Institute for the Harmonic Development of Men. There's a subtitle to the third series, prologue, didn't appear, was crossed off, and we don't know, by himself maybe, but it was my confession. This is where he says he renounces to his acquired powers, because he said they were the source of all his vices, and by putting them outside, they would become a reminding factor every time he would be tempted to use them. Madame Salzmann says to Pauline de Dampierre that she could hear him sobbing behind the door of his bedroom. So hard was the transmission. How many times he said, "You don't understand," talking about sensation, feeling, voluntary, intentional. There's much to be seen in that we can't know directly. We need a long time to be with his not only ideas, but with himself, side by side. His way of teaching is particular, really. Maybe going through wars and revolutions and poverty and misery, he sees that people around him need to come back to themselves, not to be totally taken by the events or all the exercises. Yes, take part in this, go into that direction. To feed an inner world, not to depend so much on what's going on around us. Individuality, he says, right? Not so dependent. He sees all circumstances to make someone understand, see his reactions, his petty needs. That's really a day-to-day life with him. And maybe only a master can also show one his chief feature, what he says, what specifically what we have to work on, each of us. Invited people to see their own duality, not to dream about non-duality after being sensitive, a certain unity at his side. And yes, his pupils were in presence of a grandeur. Louise March says he didn't teach, he was. The way he buries truth in Beelzebub, for example, is very striking. He wants people to dig, to search, not just to receive knowledge like this. Very dull descriptions or almost intolerable ones. So we pass quickly, and in passing he would put a little detail, information of what's important for him. So what's important is the way, what passes through him. It's not a system to be followed blindly. Yeah? Really, but in the one who he sees a possible response, then he becomes his servant, the servant of his transformation. Capable of putting himself in the place of someone and helping see his prison and ways to go out of this illusions. All by keeping their free will. So what was his goal, really? Yes, we went search and lost knowledges, yes. Some said bring the fourth way to the West. But what kept him going so strongly with such energy to awaken us? He was not the first one to say we're sleeping, right? Heraclitus in antique times also said that the waking share the same world, whereas each sleeper turns away in his own private world. So we pass quickly on the final chord of Beelzebub, that it will take perhaps a long time, or another implanted organ in us to become free from our rather dark destiny. Sometimes it could look pessimistic, but it's not, because he lives a living material with us. Movements to dance with the laws, music for a relation to the undefinable, and groups to learn to listen and to help each other. So no, we don't really understand, but it's an invitation to live in spite of our atrophied authentic impulses of faith, hope, and love, and even the fragility of our conscience. To live within the whole. Thank you.
cswr.hds.harvard.edu, copyright 2024, the President and Fellows of Harvard College.